Supposed biblical error. Did the town of Nazareth exist? Although the overwhelming majority of scholars accept the town Jesus grew up in existed, a couple of Christ-mythers and laymen deny there is evidence it existed. Even James Randi jumped on this idea that Nazareth never existed. However, most of the arguments against the existence of Nazareth come from René Salm, who is not a scholar or an archaeologist, and his work has been heavily criticized by actual experts in the field. In reality, we do have sufficient evidence for the existence of Nazareth. The University of the Holy Land launched the Nazareth Village Project, and archaeologists working at the site have found a vast amount of material dated to the time of Jesus, including the remains of ancient pottery, a wine press, 3 watchtowers, olive crushing stones, an irrigation system, and evidence of farming and quarrying. This was all published in the 2007 Bulletin of the Anglo-Israeli Archaeology Society, and the paper is attached below in the information section for anyone who wants to read it. In review of Salm's work, archaeologists who worked on the site at Nazareth noted Salm ignored the data and revealed a lack of expertise. To quote them, "It would appear that the analysis, which René Salm includes in his review, and his recent book must, in itself, be relegated to the realm of myth." Ken Dark, an archaeologist who has dug at the Nazareth site, said of his work, "Despite initial appearances, this is not a well-informed study and ignores much evidence and important published work of direct relevance. The basic premise is faulty, and Salm's reasoning is often weak and shaped by his preconceptions. Overall, his central argument is archaeologically unsupportable." So perhaps James Randi should live up to the popular belief about him and be skeptical of the rantings of an unqualified piano teacher and see what actual archaeologists and scholars have found on the issue. Randi doesn't even realize who the archaeologists are.
Scholars associated with the Nazareth Village Project, Stephen Phan, Yehuda Rapuano, and Ross Voss, none of them archaeologists, now say that evidence has been discovered there for a town that existed at the time of Jesus.
It doesn't take a lot of research to find the credentials of Voss, Phan, and Rapuano. As you can see, Voss is an archaeologist, and Rapuano is an archaeologist for Israeli antiquity authorities. And Phan directed excavations at Nazareth since 1997, and has a site listing his education and credentials as a scholar and archaeologist. It really shows how little Randi has investigated the issue. His main source is a non-archaeologist, and he erroneously claims Salm's critics are not qualified. Salm also tries to use literary arguments from the Bible against the existence of Nazareth. He notes that in Matthew's Gospel, there are variant spellings of the word Nazareth. But this is simply because of how Greek spelling and grammar works. Occasionally, the Greek spelling of words changes if the next word starts with a vowel or a rough breathing. In Matthew's Gospel, a variant spelling occurs just before a rough breathing, then before a simple vowel, and finally before a consonant, a theta, occurs. Dr. Ron C. Fay said in an interview, "When moving from one language to another with names, transcription can be a difficult discipline, especially when switching alphabets. Look what happens to the name of Jesus. Sometimes it is conjugated, give different endings depending upon its function in the sentence, and other times it is not. Jerusalem is spelled 2 different ways in Luke alone. One declinable can change endings, and one indeclinable cannot change endings, and yet there is no difference between the two." Salm also tries to say Mark's reference to Jesus being a Nazarene is in reference to another city called Nazareth, which is pretty hysterical since we have no evidence of this town existing in archaeology or any manuscripts. But we have both of this for Nazareth. The Christ-myther Kenneth Humphrey and James Randi both try to argue Nazareth is not mentioned outside of the Gospels in other works from that time, like Josephus or the Talmud. Humphrey points out that Josephus lists 45 villages from Galilee and doesn't mention Nazareth. The Talmud mentions 63 Galilean settlements, but not Nazareth. Well, this is an argument from silence, and Dr. James Strange, a leading scholar on Nazareth, has noted in an interview, "We have more archaeological sites than names of towns and historical records." Plus, by Humphrey's own logic, we would have to conclude the additional towns mentioned in the Talmud must be mystical as well, because Josephus doesn't mention them. Neither of these sources was aiming to give an exhaustive account of all the towns in Galilee. That should be pretty obvious if you read them. Psalm also takes aim at the fact that Nazareth is called a polis, which means city, and there certainly was no large settlement in that area at the time. Well, this is true, but the Greek word polis doesn't necessarily mean city. The scholar Angelos Chainotis notes the word seems to have a broader usage. Psalm has several other easily refutable arguments, and links are in the information section for more exhaustive refutations of his claims. But it should be pretty clear, people who allege Nazareth did not exist do not have a leg to stand on. Therefore, there is no reason to think the Bible made an error when it said there was a town in Galilee called Nazareth.